Hello everybody, welcome to Snyder's Inc. and we have another Mr. Ballin reaction video for you today. And today's video is 5 Strange Disappearances in Forest Part 2, the Missing 411 Phenomenon. I'm ready for this one. So let's get into it.
Every year, hundreds of people go missing inside of national parks all over North America. But of those hundreds of people, every year, a few of them go missing under very strange circumstances. And a man named David Paulides, who's a former police detective, has made it his mission to look into just the bizarre disappearances that are occurring all over North America in his series that's called Missing 411.
I need to find a way to get these books.
So there are thousands of these strange cases inside of Missing 411 that David Paulides has poured tens of thousands of hours of research into. And he puts them into books, into documentaries. And so there's really no shortage of strange cases to look at. But as I begin my own research into Missing 411 and learn about these different cases, I have been pulling groups of stories that stand out to me as being particularly interesting or just fascinating or just strange, and I'm making videos to highlight those stories. And so I've already done one video like this where I highlighted 5 stories that I thought were particularly strange. You can find that in the description. I left a link to that video if you want to check that out. And so today,
I think I reacted to that too, so.
Today, I'm going to be looking at another 5 cases from the Missing 411 project that are just totally weird. But before we get into today's stories, if you're interested in the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, you've come to the right channel, because I post 3 to 4 times a week all about.
Now it's gone to 1 time a week, but the stories usually in that case are really good.
The strange, dark, and mysterious, like I'm promising to deliver today. And if that's your deal, I would ask you to please gently uppercut the like button and then also subscribe to my channel and turn on all post notifications so you don't miss any of those 3 to 4 weekly uploads. All right, let's get into the story. So this first one really takes the cake for just being strange. You have a family that basically has 2 experiences that are somewhat connected. You're gonna have to be the judge if they're connected or not, but
okay, let's get into these 5.
Very strange. On October 1st of 2010, this family, who decided to remain anonymous for the Missing 411 story, they go camping, and it's a 3.5-year-old boy, his older sister, and then the mom and the dad. And so they go camping at Mount Shasta in California, which is a popular camping site. And the family loved to go camping there. And so they're all sitting around the campfire, kind of hanging out at the campsite. It's getting late in the evening, maybe 5, 6 o'clock. And the sister would say that she was looking at her brother, turned away for a second, and then looked back, and he was gone. And it was so sudden that she actually went to go look for him and couldn't find him. So she went and told her mom and her dad. And they start calling for their son, and they're looking all over their campsite, and he's gone. Authorities show up, and they launch a full search.
Those stories are always so interesting because hardly that someone looks like that go back and is just gone. Because even if we're going by the thing that something has taken people, to do it in that such quick of timing without being noticed almost seems ridiculous to me. I'm not saying it is wrong or anything, I'm just saying for it to be that quick, so probably longer than just a quick glance.
And for 5 hours, they have hundreds of people scouring this area, not only the campsite, but the surrounding areas, and there's no trace of this boy. 5 hours later, they find him laying in a thicket on a trail that had been searched multiple times. And it wasn't like hidden. The thicket was like right by the side of the trail. So if you've searched this trail, you've found this kid. So meaning he couldn't have been there during the search. He must have arrived and then they found him on this trail. Everybody was so happy that they found this kid and he wasn't physically harmed that no one really looked into the fact that it doesn't make any sense.
No one ever does. That's the thing we've been hearing on these 411 things. The first one we heard, and this one is They find a kid who's missing, and they don't do any more information because the kid's found alive. I'd still have questions, though. I wouldn't just ignore it.
Sense that he is here. How did he get here? Where did he go? Where has he been? No one thought about that. They were like, we got the kid back. We're all happy. The parents are happy. Everyone's ready to just move on. And so the kid goes to the hospital. The doctor looks at the kid and says, you know what? He's fine. This is obviously a traumatic situation, but he's fine. You can take him home. And so the kid goes home with his parents, and pretty quickly the family went back to normal. They were obviously super grateful that they didn't lose their son. About 3 weeks after this whole ordeal, the boy is with his grandmother, who he called Cappy, and he looks at Cappy and he goes, I don't like the other Cappy. And so his grandmother, the real Cappy, she looks at him and she was like, what do you mean? Now, remember, this is a 3.5-year-old boy. Language skills, not the best, okay? But this story that he tells his grandmother, he had previously told his father, but the father had written it off as the ramblings of a 3.5-year-old. It wasn't until the grandmother told the father about the story that he was like, I've heard that story. And so the boy says, while he was camping, he turned and he saw Cappy waving to him to come with him. And so he loves Cappy and he goes with Cappy, and Cappy leads him up a hill to a cave. Now the whole time, the real Cappy, who wasn't there, she was not with them camping. She's thinking, oh my God, someone who looks like me abducted.
What? Hold on. So this grandmother, Cappy, is not with them camping. Not at all. Not gone with them. But yet, this boy sees Cappy, the grandmother, in the forest, and it says come them, and it follows him up a hill to a cave. What? I don't even know how that makes it. What did this boy stumble into?
To this child. So she's listening, horrified. He said, she brought me up to a cave. And when we got into the cave, he said there were spiders and purses, like women's purses. And he turned to look at Cappy, and he said that her head was glowing. And it was when he realized this is not Cappy. This is the other Cappy. And he said the other Cappy kept asking him questions, but he didn't know the answers. And so the other Cappy got frustrated and told him to leave and pushed him out of the cave. And he said that he left the cave and wound up in the thicket, and that's when he was found. And so when Cappy goes and tells the father, and the father says, I've heard that story, they're like, that's so weird. Do you think there's any truth to this? Is there someone that looked like me, Cappy, that took the boy away? And so as Cappy and the boy's father are talking, Cappy feels compelled to share her own strange story about being on Mount Shasta. Because prior to this, the family, I think, the way they were looking at what happened is the boy wandered off and he returned 5 hours later. But with the boy's story...
No, that's not what happened. Nah. Boy didn't just wander off for 5 hours then come back. Nah. Some led that boy away. Some that's still there in that mountain.
Story being kind of corroborated by, the father who heard the same story. Cappy's like, I gotta share my story now because I don't know if it's connected, but I had a very strange experience on Mount Shasta as well a year ago. She went camping a year earlier with her friend, and they go to a campsite on Mount Shasta, the same place where the boy disappeared, and apparently saw the other Cappy. And so Cappy says that night they're sitting around the campfire and it's dark, and she notices a set of eyes in the woods that were glowing. So glowing red eyes, she says. And, Cappy and her friend, they go camping all the time. And so they know there could be predators and animals all over the place. And so they grab their flashlights and they shine in the direction of the eyes. And the eyes dart away and they don't think anything of it. Over the course of the night, the eyes would keep showing up all around them. And every time they'd shine a light in their direction, they would vanish. Cappy and her friend are unable to get the light on this thing. So they don't know what it is. And so they're very uneasy about it. But they decide, you know what? We're psyching ourselves out. It's just an animal that's interested in us. And so they go to bed, and they sleep in their own. She slept in a tent, and he slept in a camper. And they go to bed. And the next morning, Cappy wakes up, and she's laying on the dirt outside of her tent. And immediately she has pain in the back of her neck. And so she reaches back and she grabs her neck, and she can feel there's a cut on the back of her neck. She doesn't know what it is, and she looks up, and her friend is on the ground outside of his camper, face down as well. And so she gets up, she feels horrible, like sick, like violently sick, in fact, and she kind of staggers away over to her friend, who is laying there, and she can see too that he's got a mark on his neck, and he gets up and he's like, what happened? And they assumed that they had been bitten by, a poisonous spider. That's actually what they believed, because it was a little puncture wound on both of their necks, and that it had caused them to be sick and delirious. They'd wandered out of their camper and their tent, and they'd wound up on the ground. But now, as Cappy is retelling the story, she was like, I don't know how to connect that experience with what happened to the boy, but I can't help but feel like something weird's happening on Mount Shasta. And it would turn out that, maybe they weren't wrong, because Mount Shasta is like a hotspot for missing 411 strange disappearances.
It is insane to me that is a thing. It is insane to me that is a thing, because, to think you go to bed in your tent, he goes to bed in his camper, and you both wake up on the ground with a puncture wound in your neck. Oh, that's gotta be so weird. I wouldn't know. I'd be terrified to ever go into a forest again. I would be sitting and hiding in my house, and I'd probably never leave again. Ever.
And in fact, our next story is another Mount Shasta case. In 1999, Carl Landers was a very experienced
Okay, so this is another one from the same mountain.
hiker, climber, whose passion in life was, on the weekends or any chance he got, was to go hiking and climbing and camping. That was just what he did. He was in great shape. He was enjoying retirement. That was his happy place, is being on a mountain somewhere in California, hiking around. And he had two very close friends that he would go hiking with just about every chance he could. In 1999, in the summer, Carl decides he wants to summit Mount Shasta. And it's something he had attempted to do before, and he had been unsuccessful, and this time he was going to do it. And so Mount Shasta, it's high enough, it's about 14,000 feet, that it's not uncommon for people to stop at this point called Lake Helen, where hikers can adjust to the altitude, because it's certainly possible to get sick from being at altitude if you don't adjust to it, or if your body doesn't respond well to it. And so their plan was get to Lake Helen, camp out for the night, and then summit the next day. So they head up in May of 1999, the three of them. They get to Lake Helen, and they set up their camp for the night. It was clear that Carl already had some sort of altitude sickness, because by the time they reached Lake Helen, he's weak, he's sick, and he figures, I'm going to try to sleep it off tonight. I'll see how I feel in the morning. And so all night, Carl is just super sick. It's a horrible night for him. And so early the next morning, Carl, he's a real stubborn guy, and he really wanted to climb Mount Shasta. He says to his two friends, hey, look, I'm just going to get a head start here. I've been up basically all night. I'm going to just get up the last stretch here, summit this mountain, and then come back down and be done with it. And so his two friends, they didn't like the idea of splitting up, but Carl's an experienced guy. And he's only covering a distance of maybe 650 feet. Like, this is not some epic distance he's covering. It's basically like a day hike. So Carl leaves on his own. He leaves his backpack at the campsite, and his two friends would watch him as he kind of bent around the mountain and went up towards the summit, and that would be the last time they ever saw him. The two friends would attempt to summit as well about 30 minutes later. One of them apparently had gotten sick overnight and said, look, I can't do this, and he stays at the camp. He's like, I'll be here. We've already split up from Carl. Why don't you also go on your own, summit yourself, and I'll be here. I'll wait for Carl. I'll wait for you. The friend that does make the summit, he goes up. He follows the same trail, the short distance up to the summit, gets to the summit, and he hasn't seen Carl. He's not shocked. It is a little strange that they wouldn't have passed on the way, but he's thinking, anything could have happened. Maybe he sat down somewhere. I don't know what it is. And then comes back down expecting to see Carl back at the campsite. So he gets back.
The fact that this guy is already sick and going into it makes me think that maybe it wasn't even something took him. Maybe that thing was he just got lightheaded while going because the altitude and him being already sick, and he just collapsed maybe a good distance, fell down a certain part and just ended up probably serious injured and not able to get found again.
Back to the campsite at Lake Helen where the other sick friend had not left. He was still there. And he says, "Hey, has Carl come back?" And the friend's like, No, didn't you see him on the way up? Did you lap him? Like, what's he doing up there? And he's like, "No, I went up. I didn't see him on the way up. I didn't see him at the summit. And I didn't see him on the way down." And they're thinking to themselves, like, thinking about the trail itself. It's incredibly open. There's almost nowhere to, like, fall. There's no crevasse. There's no sheer cliff. There's almost no vegetation, really, to obscure you. It just didn't make any sense that you could vanish. A huge search is launched. They never found anything. There was also 50 to 100 people in the area that day, and nobody knew where he went. No one saw him. No one had any idea what happened to him. They interviewed everybody there. No one knows what happened to Carl. The only clue that we have of Carl is the backpack that he left at Lake Helen before he made the summit run. Other than that, for 20 years, we have no clue what happened to him. None. So this next story is really creepy.
I will say that story is really weird, and I have no explanation for it. I'm sorry if I'm very itchy. My body's still itchy from me getting my haircut.
The strange phenomenons that you get inside of these missing 411 stories is you have people that go missing really suddenly, like as if they were pulled away at high speed.
Just so everyone knows, in case this is not shocking, I'm recording a lot on the same day here, and
speed and just ripped off the face of the mountain. And this story is one of those stories. In 2010, Eric Lewis was 57 years old. He was an extremely experienced mountain climber, and he had two very close friends that were also very experienced mountain climbers. And they decided that they wanted to go hike Mount Rainier in Washington State, which is a huge mountain. And they were doing a climb that was fairly technical and fairly dangerous, and it required the three of them to be tethered together on the same cable. And so as they're making this ascent of Mount Rainier, you have friend one in the front, friend two in the middle, and then Eric Lewis is the third guy on the line all the way down. And so the way it worked is the first climber, friend number one, if he wanted to rest, the other two climbers would keep climbing up to his position and take a rest with him. So he was kind of in charge of setting the cadence of how quickly they were going to climb this mountain. And so over the course of the day, the first climber would stop periodically, and then the second climber and Eric would make their way up and wait and relax. All day that was happening. And then one time they come to a stop, and there's been nothing weird happening. Nothing's happened to this point. Everything feels very normal. The first guy stops, the second climber gets up to him, and then Eric doesn't show up. And so they pull on the line, and it's very light. And they pull it up, and the rope has been cut. Like, Eric's gone. And they're like, okay, only in an emergency would you cut the line. And so they just start immediately descending because they're like, well, it just snowed. It'll be very easy to track his footsteps. If he cut the line, he must have had a reason. Let's follow his footsteps to wherever he went. But the only footsteps on the mountain were the ones walking up, attached to the rope. Basically, Eric had been walking up, leaving footprints right behind the other two, and then the footprints just stop. There aren't footprints that go back down. It was like he was pulled off of the mountain. And so they start walking.
What? What? I don't even know how to explain this. What? I got nothing. I don't even know how to explain that.
Down, thinking they're going to run into him, but they don't. The weather gets bad enough that they ultimately abandon the hike. They go down, and they're like, geez. They tell the authorities, and they're looking everywhere, and they can't find him. And then they discover this creepy cave that's like 200 feet down and away from where they were hiking. That would have been very hard to get to. Inside of this ice cave is Eric's gear, but no Eric. And they've never found Eric's body. But for that gear to get into the cave, it wasn't just, hanging on the edge. It was inside the cave. But there was no footprints leading to the cave. There's no footprints anywhere. It was just like inexplicably, Eric's gear winds up deep inside an ice cave 200 feet away, and Eric's body was never recovered, and no one has any idea what happened to him. So the last story is actually really two distinct stories, but they together
I really wonder what happened to that dude.
Make up a particular phenomenon that occurs inside some of these missing 411 cases, and that's when some creature takes a child and actually protects them. In 1868, a 3-year-old girl vanished abruptly from her father's camp in northern Michigan. The father noticed the girl was gone. In hysterics, he enlists the help of a couple professional hunters that were there with him. They go off looking for this girl, and after a couple of hours of looking, they start to hear what sounds like her voice. And she doesn't sound particularly distraught, but it's definitely a child's voice. And so they kind of cut through this big thicket, and out bursts this massive bear-looking thing that runs away from them. And they didn't shoot it or anything. They just saw this huge animal run away, and they're thinking the worst, because they're hearing this child and now they're seeing this huge animal that looks like a bear running away. And they go through the thicket and they find this girl who's totally unharmed, who was in this kind of clearing within the thicket where clearly this bear creature had been with her. And the father's elated. He scoops up the child, and the child seems unhurt, and he asks her, like, "Where have you been? What happened?" And she says, "Oh, Mr. Wolf took me here. And Mr. Wolf was feeding me berries, and Mr. Wolf was playing with me." Maybe it was a bear or a wolf or something, but some animal had taken her, brought her into a thicket, and had not harmed her. And so the other instance occurred in 1955 when a family that was made up of mother, father, and their 8 kids were staying in this camp in Montana. And they had all these different tents set up for all their kids. And some of the older kids were staying in one of the tents with their 2-year-old sister, Ida Mae, while the parents were working and the kids were doing whatever they were doing. And so these older kids are sitting deep inside the tent, and near the entrance to the tent is where Ida Mae, the 2-year-old, is sitting. And the tent is open, like the flap is open to the tent. And as they're sitting there, the older kids would later say that a bear wandered past, reached in, grabbed Ida Mae, and scooped her up into its arm. Now, a bear does not do this with its arm, but they described it like this. The bear was holding Ida like this and ran away on 3 legs instead of 4. And so the kids are freaked out because they just saw a bear take their 2-year-old away. They're basically hysterical. They sprint up to their mom and dad. They tell them what happened. And the parents just have no idea how to react to this. They obviously get in touch with authorities. They launch the search. And as they're doing the search, police are asking the kids, like, describe to us again what you saw. And they're like, it was a bear that was like holding our sister like this. And they were like, you got to be more descriptive because bears can't do that. Was it a person? Was it a hairy person? And the police just didn't buy that it was a bear. And so 2 days go by and they haven't found this child. And so,
oh God, they must be losing it, because after 2 days, first 48 hours are crucial in finding someone.
the family obviously is thinking the worst. They're absolutely grief-stricken. And then one of the searchers finds the girl. And they find her about 300 yards away from the camp. She was inside of a very intentionally built structure. It was a crudely built fort right against the riverbed. And inside it was like a den. And she was in there and she was totally unharmed and she was perfectly fine. And they take her out and they ask her, like, you know, what happened? And she's 2. But she says, Mr. Bear fed me berries. Mr. Bear kept me here. Mr. Bear cuddled me. That's all we have. We don't know what this creature was, what bear is able to pull its arm in like this, but she felt totally unthreatened by it, and to this day we don't really know if that was a bear or something else, but whatever it was, it didn't harm Ida, and Ida never felt threatened by it. These stories are just a fraction of the
That is a insane story from the missing 411 thing. If I ever find a link to those books and I'm able to get them, I'm getting them. Because I want them. But anyways, guys, thank you all for watching this reaction. The link will be in the description below if you want to watch the original video. Hit the like button, comment, subscribe, you know how it goes. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.